Shabbat Shalom. It is amazing what you can find kosher for Passover. A colleague noting that today was not only Shabbat Hagadol, but apparently 420, forwarded me a circular from a company called Burning Bush that is offering kosher for Passover products which are infused with cannabis. Now, that is not a bush I choose to consume, but Passover is actually associated with a lot of other kinds of herbs. So we dip the bitter herb at the Seder, we have the karpas, the green, and we also have an herb called hyssop. Hyssop is not a form of foliage with which many of us are familiar. There is not a market for hyssop-infused edibles, but it is actually very important to the Passover story. And hyssop, called in Hebrew ezov, is actually a small plant with a big message for us today. So it is a member of the mint family. Some have suggested that the ancient hyssop is connected with the modern herb that is called in Arabic za'atar, that spice that you get everywhere in Israel. Much like other herbs, sometimes they will substitute oregano. In fact, it has an important role, however, in the Passover story, which is this. God says in Exodus chapter 12, "Speak to the Israelites and tell them, the 10th of the month take a lamb and set it aside, and then when you get to the 14th, take a bundle of hyssop, an agudat ezov, dunk it in the blood on the sash, bring it to the lintel and the doorposts, and then do not leave your door of the house till morning." So when the Israelites are commanded to put the blood of the paschal lamb, the blood of the paschal sacrifice, on their doorposts, the way they do that with ezov, with a bundle of hyssop. So when the Israelites are getting ready to leave Egypt and they are looking to protect their homes with the blood of the paschal lamb, they use an agudat ezov, a bundle of hyssop, to place the blood on the doorpost. Now you may ask, what is so special? Why this herb? And so one thing we know about hyssop is that if it is the biblical hyssop, that it actually doesn't even grow in the ground. It's more like a moss. And this hyssop grows from the cracks. In fact, if you go to the Kotel in Jerusalem, you'll find that the plant that is growing from the cracks in the Kotel is hyssop. So the question I ask is, why hyssop? Well, one answer is that this is before So the reason why hyssop is perhaps used is because it is absorbent. In the ancient world, we find that in many ancient rituals, hyssop is actually used as a paintbrush. Whenever you want to daub something like a paint roller, that's hyssop for you. Hyssop is actually found in our Torah portion this morning. We read V'tzivah HaKohen when they are cleansing the person who has leprosy, who has this weird syndrome. We are told actually that the Kohen in the ritual of cleansing is supposed to take 2 birds, cedar, scarlet, and hyssop. So why hyssop? Maimonides, one of the smartest rabbis to ever live, says in his Guide to the Perplexed, and I quote, "I do not know the reason for any of these things. I cannot find any principle on which to found an explanation why these things have been chosen." So look, if Maimonides doesn't know, I don't know who would. But in fact, other sages suggest that there is a reason, and that reason is one that speaks to us today. So in the book of 1 Kings, when we were told about the wisdom of Solomon, one of the few guys smarter than Maimonides, we are told that he was wisest of all men. He composed 3,000 proverbs. He wrote 1,005 songs. And he even talked about trees, from the cedar in Lebanon to the hyssop that grows out of the wall. Midrash Tanhuma explains, what is it about cedar and hyssop? In the Middle East, there is no tree that is taller, mightier than a cedar. When we talk about the cedars of Lebanon, those are the greatest trees you can find. Those are the giant redwoods of the Middle East. And so the idea is that someone is afflicted because they saw themselves as great and mighty, like a cedar. And Shimon ben Elazar says leprosy comes on account of being haughty, of being filled with oneself. And on the other hand, with hyssop, there is no tree, there is no shrub that is as short as the hyssop. And because the leper has found humility, hyssop is therefore the cure. So the cedar is representative of being haughty, of being high and mighty, of being puffed up, of being full of oneself. And the hyssop is the symbol of humility. And indeed, in our language, when we talk about pride, we talk about standing tall. So Abe Lincoln, although he was a great president, one of the things that marked him was a tremendous humility. So when he used to be on the circuit, someone once came to him. He tells a story, "Excuse me, but I have something that belongs to you." "What is that?" said Lincoln. He took a knife from his pocket and he said, "This knife was given to me with the injunction that I keep it until I found a man uglier than myself. I have carried this knife for many years, and now I pass it on to you." Lincoln added, "I have carried that knife ever since." Another time, someone accused him of being two-faced, and he said, "If I had two faces, would I be wearing this one?" Although perhaps not in that tone of voice. And so the Israelites, when they are sprinkling the blood on their doorposts, they are supposed to use azov, which is this symbol of humility. And why do they need humility as they're doing this? After all, they are already slaves. They are the lowest of the low. They are recipients of really the worst treatment that they could have imagined. But in fact, on this night, their luck will change. On this night, God is singling them out for greatness. On this night, as they are leaving Egypt, the Egyptians are giving them gift of gold and silver and precious vessels. They are being elevated from the basement to the top of the heap in one night. And so perhaps in this moment, they need to be reminded to have humility, that even though they are receiving liberation, they cannot forget where they have come from. And in fact, if you look at the rituals of Passover, at the symbols of the Seder, we actually understand this message. So at the Seder, there are times when we lean, when we recline, and there are times when we are supposed to sit upright. The idea is that when we drink wine, we remember that we are free, that we are great, but when we contemplate the matzah, the bread of our affliction, we sit up to remember that we were once eating the bread of affliction, the bread of poverty. And in fact, matzah and chametz, fun fact, only those foods that can become chametz are the ones that you are allowed to use to make matzah. So rice and corn and beans, no matter how hard they aspire, will never become chametz. Only wheat and spelt and oats and barley, those 5 grains, have that ability. And so the difference between chametz and matzah is not a difference of ingredients, but a difference of degree. And so chametz is symbolically puffed up and mighty and full of itself. It's a brioche. And matzah, no matter how much it costs per pound, is a simple food, a plain food, a food which, like azov, like the hyssop, is close to the earth. So as we observe this Passover, we can think of it as a time of simplicity or a time of luxury. So people go to these Passover platforms. It's like a cruise on land, and there is a buffet at 4, a buffet at 5. The midnight buffet turns over for the 1 a.m. buffet. Or on the other hand, you can eat very simply. And so as we come into Passover, we realize that Passover is a time of greatness, a time when we are with family, a time when we are swelled up with pride at who we are, what we've done. We remember where we came from. We remember what it means to suffer, what it means to eat poor bread. I'd like to suggest to you, though, that this is a lesson that is useful year-round and not just on those 8 days. There's a famous teaching that in one's pockets, that in each pocket, one has to have a different little note or message for oneself. On one side, a note that says, "For my sake the world was created," the note of cedar that I am the greatest. The other pocket, a note that says, "I am but dust and ashes." You know what? I'm nothing. Who am I in the scheme of the world? And knowing which pocket to draw from at any moment, that is the secret to a balanced life. But that is chametz and matzah, the idea that for 8 days a year we are reminded of, we are in touch with our humility, even in the midst of luxury. We can think about that on a national level as well. Anyone who is Jewish, anyone who cares for Israel has to feel a tremendous sense of gratitude, but also a bit of pride. As we were leaving Shabbat last week, we heard that there was something terrible in process, that UAVs and cruise missiles, ballistic missiles, were on their way to Israel, almost 300 of them. And it is really nothing short of a miracle that with 300 missiles, there was one injury. And so it is very easy to be filled with pride, with confidence in the ability of Israel, in the strength of bonds with allies. Look what we were able to escape, or thank God, look what protection we have. I'll remind everyone that hobbyist drones and gliders and bulldozers caused tremendous damage less than 7 months ago, from which we are still recovering. Pride, but also humility. On a personal level, we can think this Passover about the things that we have to be proud of, and they are hopefully many, but also to think about those things that bring us down to earth. Which pocket do we need to draw from? Is it a moment of pride or a moment of humility? One closing point. When we are told, the Israelites are told to take the azov, to take the hyssop and place the blood on their doorpost, they are told to take an agudat azov. They are told that they must take a bundle. An agudah is a grouping, something that is bound together. And in fact, there's an interpretation that says that the key to being bound together in a group is to have humility. If you walk into the room and you are convinced that you are the smartest person in the room, first of all, you might be in the wrong room. But secondly, in order to be in a group, you have to have an appreciation for your limitations and for what others have to add, that we are stronger bundled together than we are apart. In order to be some part of something bigger, a family, a team, a staff, a people, a world, you have to have a sense of what you have to contribute, but also what you need from others. And that is, by the way, perhaps the idea of the agudat azov. That no matter how humble you are, if you are part of a group, you are something bigger, you are something greater. As part of a people, you are much more than you are as an individual. And so this Passover, I would ask that we find the balance of pride and humility. That we find ways to realize that we are an agudat azov, that we are a bundle that must be united. That as we sit at the Seder, sometimes we recline and sometimes we sit up. Because in fact, we are neither cedars nor hyssop. We are neither as low nor, if you will, as high as we might think. Shabbat Shalom.